Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. So this is tutorial 3 for Info 4321 Creative Design Technique. And in today's tutorial, we are going to be learning on how to create a poster that involves the usage of typography to create a quotes poster. So this is what we are going to try and achieve in today's video. Now, without further ado, let's hop into Adobe Illustrator. You can find this template project file that I have already prepared inside of iTaklim or the link that I have provided inside of Telegram. So as you can see here, we are going to be playing around with 5 base colors and also 3 different fonts. The first thing that we are going to be doing is we are going to be creating a background for the layer first. Okay, to do so, simply go to layer 2, which has already been prepared here, and then using the rectangle tool, simply create a rectangle that is as big as your canvas or your artboard. Okay, once you have that, the next thing you want to do is to create a gradient. So the gradient tool should be located on the right panel here. If you cannot find the gradient tool, you can find it by clicking on window and then finding gradient, or using the shortcut key Ctrl F9 to find the gradient panel. Have this rectangle selected, make sure the background layer here is selected, and simply click on linear gradient. It should bring up the gradient here. By default, your gradient should be black and white. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to just use the color picker, or you can also choose your own colors to color this background to create a gradient, similar to what I have shown in the sample poster. Simply have the rectangle layer here selected, make sure it is selected, click on either points of the gradient here, and use the color picker to color the gradient. You can go as far as creating another point for this gradient to create a much smoother color transition. So to add another color to this gradient, make sure you go here to the gradient slider and make sure to click anywhere on the slider, and you will create another point for the gradient. For this third point over here, you want to change the location up here to 50% so that the gradient is in the middle. Once you have that, select the gradient here and use the color picker tool to select the second or the third color here. So these 3 colors up here are the colors for the background, and this is what you should have at the end of the day. And the only thing you have to do now is to change the orientation of the gradient here. So simply change the orientation of the gradient to 90 degrees or something that looks like this. Okay, now that you already have a background color, the next thing we are going to do is we are simply going to go to the layers panel here. The layers panel should be on the right side. I want you to rename layer 2 to background. So simply rename this layer to background and make sure to lock the layer so that when we try to move, this layer will not move. And once you've done that, create a new layer. So the new layer button should be at the very bottom here. Okay, at the bottom of the layers panel here, and select create new layer to create a new layer. So what you want to do now is to simply go to the text tool over here on the toolbar, or simply hit T on your keyboard to bring up the text tool. Create a text anywhere on your artboard or your canvas, and right now just type out all of the words that you want to put in the quotes. It is best for you to just use one text layer and have all of your text inside of this one text layer. So I'm just going to type out all of the words for the quotes that I'm going to use in this text layer. A good tip that I would like to point out here is to structure and arrange your text initially when you are creating the text layer. So for example, initially the text will go like this. So the text will only be on one single line. And then when I want to structure this text to become like the sample picture or the sample poster I've shown, I've used the enter key to separate the text into its own individual layers. So it can stay on its own individual layers and it will look a little bit cleaner and it's easier to read. Okay, it depends on what kind of sentence you have, what kind of phrases you have. If you have a longer phrase, you might want to structure it differently than this. Different text requires different kind or different techniques to structure your sentences or your words. So play around with the settings. You can always hit enter to separate the text in its own lines, or you can just backspace if you want to join them again in one single line. For me, I'm just going to go here. So this is how I want to structure my text, which is sometimes will be in its own line, and then you win and you learn will be on their own individual lines. So this is what I find to work best for this project or this code over here. So for now, the next step that we're going to do once we have typed out all of this text is firstly to just change the color of the text to white, since it's easier to see on this a darker background here. So I'm just going to change the color of the text. So go to here and change the color of the text to white. Okay, so it's easier to see now. The next thing we're going to do is simply to change the font, the individual fonts of each single word or phrase on each individual lines to match these three fonts that I have prepared in the template file. So the first one is Hawkfish, Xerox, and also Ballpark. So these three fonts, you can arrange it however you want. If you want to use your own fonts that you see fit, that you see is suitable for your project, is suitable for your quotes, for your poster, then simply use the text tool. Okay, make sure we are using the text tool and highlight individual lines or individual words that you want to change the fonts. For example, I want to change the font sometimes here to Xerox. So highlight the font. You can go up here to the character panel here, or you can go to the character which is over here, the character menu here, and simply change the the font to Xerox. So Xerox regular over here. Okay, so once you have changed the font over here, you can play around with the sizing of the font, or you can also play around with the tracking, which is the distance. Okay, the distance between individual letters inside of the selected or the highlighted text. Okay, so I'm going to play around with the settings, and for now I'm just going to put the tracking for this word to 40, and the font will simply be something around 90. Don't worry, you can always change the settings later on after you have worked and change all of the fonts that are below here. Okay, so the next one is You Win. This one, I want to use the Hawkfish font. So change the font to Hawkfish. Okay, and the next one is sometimes again Xerox, and the last one is You Learn. Change it to Hawkfish again. And then I'm just going to add another text, which is That is Life. And this specific text line over here will be using the Ballpark Winner font. So I'm just going to change it to Ballpark Winner. The next step is to just resize the fonts, resize every single letter, every single word, and then you can change the tracking, the leading, and the kerning of the font. Okay, so let's do that together so that you have an idea of what I'm trying to do. For example, I want to change the word You in here. I want to increase the size to a little bit bigger, maybe about 100. Okay, and as you can see, it's overlapping with the word sometimes, so this can easily be fixed by changing the leading of the font. So increase the leading. So I'm going to increase the leading to somewhere around 140. Okay, and I'm just going to follow the same sizing for this font over here. So it's 90 in the size of the font, 90 points. So 90 points for this word over here. And then I'm just going to change it to change ulearn to follow the same font, the same sizing as the word you win. So 140 over here. Or if it's too, sorry, it's 100. So 140 is too big, I'm sorry. And then simply change the the leading of the font to become around 140. So you can just change the tracking, the leading of all these texts. So play around and have an idea of what all these settings do until you get the results that you want. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to add some lines and some shapes to make this text layer look a little bit more interesting. To do that, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to create a line. So to create a line, simply go to the rectangle tool here, right click on the rectangle tool and select the line segment tool. Okay, once you have that, simply just create a line, a horizontal line that goes across. Okay, just put it somewhere around there. And then once you have that, you can change the stroke color of this line here to white, because the color of everything else here is white, and change the stroke width to 3 pixels. Okay, you should have this line over here. So you should have this line over here, and don't forget to select the line and align this on the horizontal axis. So have the line selected, go to the align tool and click on horizontal align center. That should align this line at the very center horizontally. Once you have that, the next settings that we are going to be playing around is the stroke setting. So the stroke setting should be on the right side here, on the right panel here. So under stroke tool here, if you cannot find it, it should be under window and stroke over here. Or your keyboard shortcut is Ctrl F10. Once you have that, the settings that we want to change here is to check on the dash line. Okay, so it looks like that, and you can play around with the value of the dash here. Lower value means that more of the dashes that you can see, and the higher value means that the less number of dash that you can see. I find that for this project, 10 points work best. Okay, you can go up to 13 if you want, or as low as 7 if you want. So but the sweet spot for me is like 10. And once you have that, make sure to check the cap to make it a round cap. So change it from butt cap to round cap. So click on round cap, and you want to change the arrowheads here. Change it to whatever arrowheads that you want. For me, I prefer to use arrow 14 here, so arrowhead 14. Okay, it complements the fonts better for me personally. This is my own preference. You can choose whatever you want. And don't forget to change the arrowhead for the right side to match the one on the left. So at the end of the day, you should have this line over here. Okay, so we are close to being done working with the text layer here. The next thing we are going to do is we are going to add some shapes with colors to complement and make the whole text layer or the whole code layer here a little bit more interesting. So the first thing we're going to do, and the next thing we're going to do is to just click on the rectangle tool, okay, and create a new rectangle. Okay, so simply create a new rectangle, and make sure you create the rectangle somewhere around this word sometimes here, because the rectangles are going to be behind this word, the first sometimes word and the second sometimes word also. So first create a rectangle somewhere around there. Okay, we can change the dimension later, so just simply create one. Okay, once you have that, I want you to just disable the stroke color. So remove stroke color, and for the fill color, you can change it to whatever color that you want, but you can also use the color picker. Okay, So the color picker or the eyedropper tool, eye on your keyboard, and select the first color that is on the bottom color palette here. So this color over here. So that should give you this. Go back to the selection tool and arrange this layer so that it's at the bottom. So you can just hit Control and open square bracket to send backward. Okay, and then you can do it again until the text layer appears, like so. Okay, so once you have that, you can adjust the size and do whatever you want for this one. Okay, so maybe somewhere around there. Don't forget to use the align tool to align this shape horizontally, like so. Once you have this, you can leave it at this, but you can also use the triangle shape to create a little bit more of an interesting shape instead of just one boring rectangle. So after you've done this, next thing you're going to do is to change the shape tool from the rectangle tool to the polygon tool. Okay, and then click anywhere to create a new polygon and simply set the sides to just 3 because we are going to be creating a triangle. Okay, polygon, it doesn't matter what the radius is, the importance is the sides for the rectangle. For this polygon here is 3 because we want to create a triangle, and hit OK to create the triangle. Alright, once you have the triangle here, just change the color of this triangle so that you can see the difference between the rectangle and the triangle, so that the colors are contrasting. So maybe green color here. Okay, so you can see the green color on top of this rectangle here. What you want to do now is to simply rotate this triangle here about 90 degrees like this. Okay, and then simply position it on your artboard like so. Make sure it's snapping over there. If it's not snapping correctly, make sure to go to view and make sure snap to point is the only option enabled. Make sure snap to pixel is disabled, and also snap to grid and snap to glyph is disabled. Only snap to point enabled. Once you have that, just position the triangle like that, and also on the bottom side here. Okay, it doesn't have to be a perfect triangle, so you can just do that. Okay, no problem. Just make sure it snaps. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure it snaps over here like this. Okay, once you have that, maybe you want to make it a little bit shorter. Okay, you can make it a little bit shorter like this. Okay, once you have that, the next thing you're going to do is to just duplicate this triangle. So to duplicate, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, or you can hit Alt on your keyboard, click and drag to duplicate, and rotate this triangle 180 degrees and position it at the other side of the rectangle, and make sure it snaps to each of the corners or edges of the vertices of the rectangle here, and you should have something that looks like this. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is to select the triangle here, shift and select the rectangle, and shift and select the next triangle here. So you should be selecting 3 objects here. Now go to the pathfinder tool. So the pathfinder tool should be over here. If you cannot find it, window and pathfinder, and your keyboard shortcut should be Shift Ctrl F9. Once you have that, with these 3 shapes selected, hit minus front, and you should have this shape over here. And if you see that your text has disappeared, that's because it's at the bottom. So you simply want to just rearrange this shape to be at the back. Okay, or use your keyboard shortcut Control and open square bracket. And okay, you have this. You can settle for this one but I prefer to use the direct selection tool. Select this shape over here and only select this one over here. Okay, select the middle circular thing over here, the circular point over here. Select and just round it off like that. Do the same thing for this side over here, round it off, and at the end of the day you should have something that looks like this. Okay, so that's good already. Once you have that, you can simply duplicate this rectangle and put it at the bottom, or you can create a new rectangle. Okay, so I'm just going to create a new rectangle over the second wood here, and then arrange it to be at the bottom or behind this wood over here. And don't forget to align at the horizontal axis. And you can style this rectangle however you want, but for me, I think I'm done. I'm just going to settle for this look over here. Okay, I'm not going to change both. I'm just going to change one to this shape and one to this just the normal shape to give it a little bit more variety. Okay, but you can change it to whatever shape that you want, whatever your heart pleases. And the next thing I'm just going to do is to just change the color of this rectangle here to the second color on the color guide or color scheme by using the eyedropper tool, eye on your keyboard, and then change the color to this one. It's a subtle change of colors, but you can see it if you look closely. Okay, alright, so once you have that, everything should essentially be done here. You can work on this even more, play around with the tracking, play around with the leading and also the kerning, and you can add a lot more shapes. You can add multiple different patterns and shapes to, you know, make this more interesting. But for me, not only do I like having words or typography that is clean, but I usually work with a lot of minimal and cleaner design. So this is my own preference. You can add as much or as little shape elements as you want, just to spice up and make your typography or your code posters look interesting to your eyes. The next part that we are going to look on is to just create the background shapes, which is the a little bit of, you know, mountain area down here and also the moon up here. So it's really simple. What you want to do now is to lock this layer here. Okay, you can rename it. Okay, you can rename it to text layer and then lock. And I want you to unlock the background layer. Okay, so unlock the background layer here. Now what I want you to do is to use the pen tool. Okay, use the pen tool, P on your keyboard for the pen tool, and just roughly draw some kind of mountain area here. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect because we're not aiming for perfection here. We're just aiming to have some kind of a mountain. Okay, once you have this shape over here, you can use a gradient if you want, but I don't want to use a gradient here. I just want to use a normal color, a normal solid color. So I'm just going to eyedrop the shape of this mountain here, you can see, to this color here. Okay, after I've done that, maybe you want to drop the opacity to 95, or you can play around with the settings. And then once you've done that, use the pen tool again to create another mountain that is a little bit taller and bigger than the previous mountain here. Okay, play around with the settings until you get something that looks like this. And for the second mountain here, I want to eyedrop this color to a much darker color, so I'm just going to use the darkest color we have here. And then once you have that, just send it backwards. Okay, arrange it to the back like that. So what I just did is press Ctrl and open square bracket to bring it to the back. And just a good practice for you is to just decrease the opacity to somewhere around 60 to 40%. Okay, so it's very subtle. Alright, so you should have something that looks like that. Okay. Again, play around with the settings. You can create whatever you want using the pen tool. Make your quote posters as interesting as you can, or as interesting as you want, depending on what you're trying to achieve to your heart's content. The next thing we're going to do, or maybe the last thing that we're going to do, is to just create like the moon that is up here. So it's pretty easy and pretty self-explanatory, and I'm sure everyone knows how to do it by now. Is to just use the ellipse tool and create a perfect circle that's not too big but not too small. Change the color to white. Okay, and you can stop here, but you can also duplicate this layer here. So Control C, Control V, and then place it at the middle, and change the second color to be a little bit darker, just a little bit darker, and resize it to be a little bit smaller, and you should have that moon over there. And at the end of the day, this is what you should have. Just a simple quote poster with some background elements that you can use, that you can create by using simple shapes and also the pen tool. And you can customize it however you want. You can either add a frame, you can add other shapes, so other tiny patterns to spice up and make this poster more interesting. But as I said, I like to play with minimal and clean design, so this is what I end up settled with. Okay, so this is the end of the video for tutorial 3, designing a poster using some motivational quotes. So that is it for the video today, and as always, if you have any questions, if you do not understand anything, if you have any trouble with any of the tools inside of Adobe Illustrator, don't hesitate to ask questions and I will try my best to help you. So thank you so much for watching the video, and I hope to see you again in our next class. Thank you so much, everyone.